The Galactic Empire mocked the captured old human until his warning silenced the stars. Part 1: The Cage of Laughter. The cell was cold and transparent, and every creature that walked past it stopped to stare. I did not look back at most of them. I sat on the hard floor with my back against the far wall, my legs stretched out in front of me, and I counted the ceiling panels. 112. Same as yesterday. I had nothing else to count, so I counted them again. They had taken my boots. That was the first thing they did after pulling me off the field. A Veiltheri soldier, tall, blue-gray skin, eyes like polished copper, had looked at my boots for a long moment before removing them. He turned them over in his hands, inspecting the worn soles, the fraying laces, the mud packed into the seams. Then he had laughed. Not a cruel laugh. A genuinely amused one. The way you laugh at a child who shows you a drawing they are proud of. I let him laugh. I memorized his face. That was 3 weeks ago. The corridor outside my cell was busy at certain hours. Early morning, by their ship's clock, not any son I knew, the crew changed shifts. They walked in groups of 4 or 5, talking among themselves in their clipped, musical language. I had already learned 47 of their words. I was working on the next 20. It helped to have something to do with my mind. It kept the grief from taking up too much space. A group of younger soldiers stopped outside the cell on the 4th day. They always did, eventually. I was the attraction of the ship. The humans were gone, or so they believed, and I was the last one anyone in the Empire had seen up close. I was old. I was small by their standards. My gray hair and my slow movements made them lean toward each other and whisper, and then they would laugh at whatever they whispered. I did not mind. On the 9th day, a female officer came to sit across from me. She set a low stool outside the cell wall and placed a data tablet on her knee. She was younger than most officers I had seen, sharp features, a dark marking along her left temple that was a rank symbol, I had figured out. Her name, I would later learn, was Say. She looked at me the way a scientist looks at a preserved specimen. Curious. Slightly repulsed. You can understand me, she said. It was not a question. Well enough, I said. My voice was rough. I had not spoken to anyone in 3 weeks, and before that, I had been doing other things that were not speaking. She made a note on her tablet. You are the eldest human we have encountered. The records suggest humans have short lives. How old are you? Old enough to know that question is usually followed by a worse one, I said. She tilted her head. Is that humor? It was an observation. She wrote something else. What was your function? Your role among your kind. I looked at the ceiling panels for a moment. I kept records, I said. Old ones, mostly. She accepted that. She did not believe it was the whole truth. I could see that in the slight narrowing of her copper-colored eyes, but she accepted it for now and moved on to easier questions. My physical condition. My diet requirements. Whether I needed anything. I said I was fine. I was not fine. But I had been worse. She came back every day after that. On the 14th day, they moved me to a larger cell on a different deck. This one had a wider corridor, and the wider corridor meant more foot traffic. I understood the purpose immediately. I was being displayed more prominently. A senior commander walked past that first afternoon and stopped, looking in at me with unconcealed amusement. He said something in their language. One of the words I had already learned. It meant ancient or possibly leftover. It was hard to know without more context. I wrote both possibilities in the condensation on the inside of my cell wall, using one finger, and then wiped it clean. Say noticed my finger moving against the wall the next time she visited. She looked at the blank surface for a moment. What were you writing? She asked. A word I am trying to remember, I said. Which word? Patience, I said. She wrote something on her tablet. I could see from the movement of her stylus that she wrote more than one word. On the 20th day, they brought the Grand Archon. I had heard his name before I saw him. The crew spoke it differently than other names, with a small pause before it, like they were clearing space for the word. He arrived with 12 attendants and 4 guards, and the corridor went quiet in a way it had never gone quiet before. He was taller than the other Veiltheri. Older, too. His skin had the faint translucence that came with age in their species. He wore no visible weapon, which told me he felt no need for one. He looked at me for a long time without speaking. I looked back. So, he said finally, in a translation device's flat rendering of his voice, this is the face of a dying species. The attendants around him made small sounds of amusement. Say, standing to the side, said nothing. I studied his face. The way he held his shoulders. The exact position of his feet. I read 12 things in 6 seconds that I did not show on my own face. And then I said the only 4 words I had been saving for this exact moment. Not yet. But soon. The corridor was quiet again. A different kind of quiet this time. The Grand Archon looked at me for 3 more seconds. Then he turned and walked away. Say looked at me over her shoulder as she followed the group out. I could not read her expression. But she did not laugh. No one in that corridor laughed. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes and let myself feel, for just a moment, the weight of everything I was carrying. The names I remembered. The people who had sent me here on purpose. Then I opened my eyes, and I began counting ceiling panels again. 1, 2, 3. I had work to do. Part 2, The Weight of Scars. Say came back the next morning with 2 tablets instead of 1. She set them both down, folded her hands on her knee, and looked at me with the expression of someone who had been thinking about something all night and had decided to stop pretending she had not. What did you mean, she said, when you spoke to the Archon? I meant what I said. Not yet, she repeated. Those 2 words. What are they attached to? I looked at her for a moment. Then I shifted position, stretching my back against the wall. Do you know how humanity began, say? Not the version in your empire's records. The actual version. She picked up one of her tablets. We have records of your species' origin world. Resource depletion. Conflict. A long history of internal. Put the tablet down, I said. Not harshly. She looked up, surprised, but she set the tablet on the floor. We did not start with ships, I told her. We started in dirt. Literal dirt. Our first tools were rocks. Our first homes were holes we dug in the ground or found in hillsides. For most of our history, the biggest threat to a human being was another human being. We nearly ended ourselves 100 times before we ever left the ground. Disease took millions of us in a single season. Droughts collapsed civilizations. Floods erased cities that had stood for 1,000 years. We burned our own atmosphere so slowly that most of us did not notice until the damage was already past a point that should have been unrecoverable. Say was watching me. She was not writing. And yet, she said. And yet, I agreed. We recovered. Not cleanly. Not without cost. We recovered the way a man recovers after losing a hand, functional again, but changed. Always aware of what is missing. Always making sure the other hand is capable of doing twice the work. She picked up her tablet. This time I did not tell her to put it down. Your conflict records are incomplete, she said, scrolling. We identified at least 4 separate periods where your species appeared to be on the edge of complete collapse. There were more than 4, I said. Those are just the ones visible from the outside. She looked up. The others were internal, I continued. Things we chose not to broadcast. When you are fighting for your survival, you do not announce your weakest moments. You keep them, though. You record them. You study them so carefully that by the time the next collapse begins, someone in a quiet room somewhere has already written the manual for getting through it. Someone like you, she said. Someone like the institution I belong to, I said. I am not unique. I am one of many. Or I was. She made a note. Her stylus moved carefully, and I could see she was transcribing more of my words than she was supposed to. This was not a casual interrogation anymore for her. She was trying to understand something. Your title, she said. You told me you kept records. I did keep records. But your language has a different word for what you are. Our translation archive found it in intercepted communications. The word is, she checked her tablet and attempted to pronounce 2 syllables that did not exist in her language. Archivist strategist, I said. That is close enough. The translation our system offers is something between historian and weapons designer, she said carefully. That is also close enough. She set the tablet down again. Slowly. The way people set things down when they need both hands free for thinking. We believed your species was in a final defensive posture, she said. The fleet sent to your core systems found minimal resistance. The conclusion among our command staff was that humanity had already lost the capacity to mount an effective response. I know, I said. You were meant to believe that. The words sat between us for a moment. Say's copper eyes moved over my face. She was trying to find the performance in it. The bluff. She was trained to read deception, all Imperial officers were, and she was finding nothing she recognized. You are not afraid, she said quietly. I am afraid of many things, I told her. But this situation is not one of them. We have your world. We have your people's last system under approach. You are sitting in a cell on the flagship of the Empire's finest fleet. What could you possibly be unafraid of? I looked at her. At her youth. At the absolute certainty her empire had built into her from the first day she drew breath, the certainty that the Veiltheri Galactic Empire was the permanent and final order of the universe. Let me tell you about a man named Oliver, I said. She waited. Oliver was a specialist in a particular kind of engineering, the kind that survives after everything else has already been destroyed. 40 years before the Contact War, he was part of a small team given a single assignment. The assignment was not to build anything that could win a conventional conflict. The assignment was to make sure that if every conventional defense failed, there was still something left that the enemy could not predict, could not find, and could not stop. A weapon, Say said. A system, I said. Different from a weapon. A weapon ends a conflict by making one side unable to continue. Oliver's system ends a conflict by making the other side unwilling to continue. She was very still. Oliver finished his work 11 years ago, I said. He was 63 years old and had spent most of his career in a location that does not appear on any map your empire has ever collected. When he was done, he went home, sat in his garden, and grew tomatoes. Why are you telling me this? Say said. Because you asked about what I am not afraid of, I said. And the reason I am not afraid is that Oliver did his job. And 31 other people like Oliver did their jobs. And I did my job, which was to be here, in this cell, having this conversation with you. A long silence. You allowed yourself to be captured, she said. I did not confirm or deny. I let the silence work. She stood up. Her movements were controlled, but I noticed the slight rigidity in her spine that had not been there when she sat down. She picked up both her tablets. I will need to report this conversation, she said. I know, I said. That is what I am counting on. She walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back once. Are you hungry? She said. It was a strange question to ask in that moment, and we both knew it. Yes, actually, I said. Thank you for asking. She left. I heard her footsteps down the corridor, slower than usual. The walk of someone who had entered a room expecting to do one thing and was leaving with a different weight on their shoulders. I leaned my head back against the wall and breathed slowly. 3 days earlier, a guard on the night rotation had let slip, carelessly, the way people speak when they think the person listening is too old or too foreign to understand, that the Empire's advance fleet had already received orders. The final push toward humanity's last defended system was scheduled. He had said it with pride. The war was as good as finished. When he said it, I had closed my eyes briefly. Not in despair. In recognition. They had found the signal. The one Oliver's team had left for them to find. The one that was meant to look like a desperate last coordinate. The one that pointed exactly where we wanted the Empire's fleet to be. I thought of Oliver in his garden. I hoped the tomatoes were good that year. Then I thought of everyone who would not see another harvest. And I sat with that for a while, because sitting with it was the least I could do. The least any of us could do was remember. Part 3, the warning no one wanted. On the 25th day, I asked to speak to the Grand Archon. The guard on duty, a young male whose name I had learned was Corvin, because he had a habit of signing daily logs near enough to my cell wall that I could read them, looked at me with something between amusement and pity. The Archon does not have conversations with prisoners, Corvin said. He will want to have this one, I said. Corvin relayed the request. I knew he would, because boredom is a universal trait and I was the most interesting thing on the ship. The message traveled up through several layers of command, each layer presumably adding its own commentary about the presumption of the old human. 3 hours later, Say appeared at my cell with 2 guards behind her. "You are being brought before the Archon," she said. "Do not make this a mistake." "I never do," I said. They walked me through corridors I had been memorizing for 3.5 weeks. I noted 7 things along the route that I had not been able to confirm from my cell. I filed them carefully in the part of my mind that had been collecting and storing since the day I arrived. The Archon's audience chamber was large and deliberately designed to make visitors feel small. High ceilings, dark material on every surface, lighting that came from above and cast everything below in shadow. A semicircle of elevated seats for senior officers. At the center, on a platform just high enough to require looking up at, the Grand Archon sat in a chair that was not quite a throne but had the same intention. There were perhaps 40 Veiltheri in the room. Officers, advisors, record keepers. Several of them looked at me with open amusement when I walked in. I walked to the center of the room and stopped. I stood straight. My feet hurt without boots, but I did not shift my weight. "The human wishes to speak," the Archon said. His translation device rendered his voice flat and even. "We are listening." Briefly. "I am here to present a formal strategic briefing," I said. "With your permission." A ripple of sound moved through the room. Laughter, mostly. One of the senior officers said something in Veiltheri and several others responded with more laughter. "A strategic briefing," the Archon repeated. "From a prisoner." "From humanity's representative," I said. "I have always been humanity's representative. My capture was the method of delivery, not an accident." The laughter did not stop, but it changed in texture. It became slightly more careful. "Speak, then," the Archon said. He gestured to the room as if presenting a show. I spoke for 20 minutes. I began with their fleet movements over the past 6 weeks, specific coordinates, specific vessel designations, maneuver patterns. Things that could only be known by someone with access to intelligence that the Empire believed was secure. The room went very quiet very quickly once it became clear I was not guessing. Then I addressed their communications encryption. I explained, in straightforward terms, that the primary cipher the Imperial fleet had been using for 16 months had been read by humanity's intelligence teams for 14 of those months. I listed 4 specific command orders that had been intercepted, summarized, and incorporated into human planning. The quiet became the specific kind of quiet that happens when people in a room simultaneously realize something they do not want to be true. Then I told them what humanity had been doing. "While your fleet engaged our forward positions," I said, "you were observing a defense that was designed to be observed. Every vessel that stood against you was expendable and was known to be expendable before the first engagement. The personnel aboard those vessels volunteered for that assignment." I paused. Not for effect. Because the next words were heavy, and I wanted to carry them correctly. "Every human life that was taken in the engagements your fleet considers victories was given freely, with full knowledge of what it was being given for. To give your command the confidence it needed to advance. To bring your fleet to exactly the position it now occupies." A senior officer in the second row stood up. "This is fabrication. The human is. The forward fleet reached the Crestfall system 4 days ago," I said. I had not been told this. I had calculated it from the ship's movement data and the guards slipped 3 days earlier. They found it empty. Not evacuated in panic. Empty in a way that takes years of planning. No infrastructure. No population signatures. No energy readings above background levels. As if the system had never been inhabited at all. The standing officer sat down slowly. I looked at the Archon. His face had not changed, but his hands had. They rested differently on the arms of his chair than they had when I first walked in. "What humanity has done," I continued, "is not retreat. We do not have a word in any of our languages for the thing we have done, because we have never needed to do it before. The closest I can offer you is a concept called measured disappearance. The removal of everything that can be targeted, tracked, or held. We have been practicing it for 40 years. "And where have you disappeared to?" the Archon said. His voice was even. He was working very hard to keep it even. "Somewhere your charts do not include," I said. "Which is itself the answer to your question. If I could tell you where, I would not be standing here." A long silence. You described a contingency earlier, said a female advisor near the Archon's left shoulder. She had a different bearing than the officers. A thinker, not a commander. Your words to say. Oliver and 31 others. Yes, I said. You called it a system. Not a weapon. Yes. Explain the distinction, she said. I looked at her. She was the most dangerous person in the room, I decided. Not because of rank, but because she was asking the right questions in the right order. A weapon requires a target, I said. A system requires only conditions. The conditions have been met. The system is already active. It was activated when your advance fleet entered the Crestfall system and found it empty. That was the trigger. Not an act of war. An observation. A recognition. What does it do? She said quietly. It makes continuing this campaign more costly than any outcome the Empire could achieve from it, I said. Not through force. Through consequence. I cannot give you the specific mechanism, not because I am protecting it, but because I genuinely do not know all of its components. It was designed that way deliberately. No single person knows the full shape of it. I know my piece. Oliver knew his. The others knew theirs. And your piece, said the Archon, was to be here. My piece, I said, was to warn you. Formally, on record, before the consequences arrived. So that no one in the Empire could ever claim, afterward, that they did not know. That they were not told. That they had no choice. The room was completely silent. I turned slightly and looked at Say, who was standing near the wall to my left. Her face was careful and still, but her eyes were doing the work her face was not allowed to do. I am not asking you to surrender, I said, returning to the Archon. I am not asking for anything. I am telling you that a door is still open. It will not be open much longer. When it closes, the shape of this conflict changes in ways that I do not believe your Empire is prepared for. Not because you are weak. But because what humanity built in those 40 years was specifically designed to be a surprise to a civilization that has never faced extinction. Every civilization fears extinction, the Archon said. Fearing it and having survived it multiple times are different educations, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, from near the back of the room, one of the junior officers laughed. Not cruelly. Nervously. The kind of laugh that escapes when a person does not know what else to do. A second one joined in. Then a third. The Archon did not laugh. The female advisor did not laugh. And one intelligence officer, a tall male in a pale gray uniform who had been standing very still near the right wall, turned without a word and walked toward the exit. No one called him back. I watched him leave. The Archon raised one hand and the remaining laughter stopped. Return the human to his cell, he said. Say walked forward and touched my arm lightly. I allowed myself to be led out. In the corridor, she did not speak. I did not speak. We walked past the crew members who stepped aside for us, past the corridors I had already memorized, back toward the transparent cell and its hard floor. At the door, before the guards sealed it, she stopped. The officer who left the room, she said quietly. You were watching him. Yes, I said. Why? Because he was the only person in that room who had already done the calculation, I said. And he did not like his answer. She looked at me for a moment. Then she stepped back, and the door sealed between us. I sat down on the floor. I closed my eyes and thought of a garden full of tomatoes. Of a 63-year-old man who had finished his work and gone home. Of 31 others in 31 quiet places, each carrying one piece of a puzzle that no single person could see in full. And I thought of the door that was still, just barely, still open. I hoped someone on the other side would walk through it in time. Part 4, when the stars went quiet. The vibration started on the third morning after my audience with the Archon. Not a sound. A feeling. The kind that moves through metal and floor and the bones of your feet before it ever becomes something your ears can process. I was sitting with my back against the wall and my eyes open, and I felt it roll through the ship from somewhere far forward, like a deep breath the vessel was taking without meaning to. I pressed my palm flat against the floor. It came again. Regular. Slow. Something enormous had changed in the space around us. Above me, through the ceiling of my cell, I heard the subtle change in the ship's ambient tone that meant the crew had gone to elevated readiness. Not full alert. Not yet. But the kind of quiet, coordinated acceleration that happens when officers start moving faster than they were moving 10 minutes ago. I sat very still and listened. 2 hours later, Say came. She did not sit on her stool. She stood outside the cell with her hands at her sides and looked at me with an expression that was new on her face. It was not fear, exactly. It was the look of someone standing in a room where the furniture has moved in the night and everything is still technically where it belongs, but the distances between things are wrong. Crestfall, she said. The advance fleet reached the system 3 days ago. Full approach pattern. No resistance. I know, I said. The system is empty, she said. Not evacuated. There is no evidence it was ever significantly inhabited. The background energy signature reads as natural. Uninhabited. Raw. Our geologists are saying the surface formations on the primary planet could not have developed in the presence of industrial civilization. No, I said. They could not. That is impossible, she said. We have records. Your people lived in that system for 214 years, I said. And then we took the records with us when we left. And Oliver's team made sure the geography agreed. She stared at me. You changed a planet, she said. We changed several, I said. The ones that mattered. The ones someone would look at first. The silence stretched between us. Outside, I could hear the distant movement of crew, the tight, professional sounds of a ship that is trying very hard to remain calm. Relay 9 went quiet this morning, Say said. The beacon on the outer edge of the Veil Ferry 4th ring. No signal. No distress. No detonation signature. Just silence. Yes, I said. You knew. I did not know the specific timing, I said. I knew the sequence. She sat down on the stool. She did it slowly, the way people sit when their legs have decided to make the decision for them. Relay 9 is not a military installation, she said. It is a communication anchor. It keeps that entire sector connected to the Imperial network. I know what it is, I said. Who did this, she said. I told you, I said. No single person knows the full shape of the system. I do not know who handled the relays. I know what the relays were for. And what were they for, she said. I looked at her carefully. She had come a long way from the officer who had sat down across from me 3 weeks ago with professional curiosity and mild contempt. The contempt was completely gone. The curiosity had become something more urgent. She was not writing anything on her tablet. She was just looking at me. Isolation, I said. Not destruction. The relay going quiet means that sector cannot call for help and cannot receive orders. It becomes independent. If the Empire chooses to continue this campaign, it will do so without those forces. You are cutting us apart, she said. We are rearranging the shape of the decision, I said. The Empire can still choose to stop. Everything that has happened so far is reversible. Relays can be rebuilt. Systems can be recontacted. Nothing living has been harmed. Not yet, she said. The 2 words landed between us like an echo. She heard them as she said them, heard what she had done, and looked up at me. That is what you said to the Archon, she said quietly. Not yet. But soon. Yes, I said. She was quiet for a long time. Corvin told me something, she said finally. From the evening you asked for the Archon audience. He said you heard him mention the advance fleet's schedule. He said you had no reaction. I had a reaction, I said. He just did not recognize it. What was your reaction? I considered how to explain it. Relief, I said. They had found the signal exactly when they were supposed to find it. Everything was proceeding correctly. She looked at the floor between us. We were not fighting a war, she said slowly. We were walking a path. A path we built, I confirmed. And clearly marked. And waited at the end of. She stood up. Walked a few steps. Turned back. The intelligence officer who left the Archon's chamber, she said. Commander Aerith. He submitted a full strategic reassessment to the War Council 6 hours after your briefing. I said nothing. It was rejected, she said. The Archon's senior staff classified it as speculative and based on unverified human claims. Aerith has been reassigned to administrative duties pending a conduct review. I closed my eyes briefly. They punished him for listening, I said. They are afraid, she said. When powerful people are afraid, they punish the ones who name the thing they are afraid of. I know, I said. Humans do it too. We just learned, eventually, that the punishment does not make the thing go away. She sat back down. What happens now, she said. Not a command voice. Not an officer's voice. Just a person asking a question they genuinely did not know the answer to. The relay was the first note, I said. It is telling the Empire that the music has started. That is all. The next notes will confirm that the melody is real. And if the Empire does not respond, she said. Then the music gets louder, I said. And at a certain point, it becomes the only thing anyone can hear. She looked at her hands. At the tablet she had not opened since sitting down. I have been recording these conversations, she said. I want you to know that. I have been sending the full transcripts, unedited, to my own archive. Not the Imperial record. My personal one. I looked at her. Why are you telling me? Because if something happens, she said, I want there to be somewhere that has the correct version of events. Not the Empire's version. I studied her face. There was something genuine in it that had not been there on the first day. Not loyalty to me. Not sympathy for humanity. Something more complicated. The kind of thing that happens to a person when they realize the story they were given since childhood is not the whole story. Your archive is in a location the Empire can access, I said. I know, she said. Why not send it somewhere else, I said. A small pause. Where would I send it, she said. I said nothing. But my eyes moved, briefly, to the corner of the cell wall where the condensation had dried. Where I had once written a word and wiped it clean. She looked at the wall. Back at me. I watched her put something together that I had left deliberately loose for her to assemble herself. You have been communicating, she said. I have been sitting in a cell for 28 days, I said. That is not a denial, she said. It was not a denial. I did not offer her a confirmation either. I offered her a long, even look that said everything I was willing to say on the subject. She picked up her tablet and stood. She was halfway to the door when the ship shuddered. Not the low, rolling vibration from the morning. This was sharper. Localized. Every light in the corridor flickered once, twice. From somewhere deep in the ship came a sound that was not an explosion, not loud enough, not destructive enough, but was the sound of systems registering something they had not expected to register. Say grabbed the door frame. I did not move. I pressed my palm flat against the floor again. Through the floor I felt it, a pulse. Regular. Rhythmic. And massive. Something had come out of faster-than-light travel very nearby. Something large enough that its re-entry into normal space had pushed a wave through the physical structure of everything for a considerable distance in all directions. What is that? Say said. Her voice was controlled. She was still an officer. But I heard the thing underneath it. That, I said, is the message becoming visible. She looked at me from the doorway. The light steadied. Somewhere above us, on the bridge, I could hear the precise, rapid sounds of a crew discovering something they could not explain. You said the door was still open, Say said. It is, I said. How much longer? I looked at the ceiling. At the panels I had counted so many times. I thought of Oliver. Of 31 others. Of a system designed to make a civilization reconsider everything. Not very long, I said quietly. Someone needs to walk through it soon. She left at a half-run. I heard her boots on the corridor floor going faster and faster until the sound disappeared around a corner. I sat in the silence that followed and breathed slowly, in and out, and I thought about what would happen next. And I thought about all the people who had made sure I would be here to see it. Part 5, What Outlasts the Stars? The ship did not sleep that night. I could feel it through the floor, the constant movement of crew, the low cycling of systems pushed into configurations they were not usually asked to hold. The lights in my corridor dimmed once for a long period, which told me power was being redirected. I did not need to see the bridge to know what they were looking at. I had helped design what they were looking at. The vessel that had dropped out of faster-than-light travel was not military. From the moment it arrived, that would be clear to any scanner. It was too slow for military purpose. Too lightly shielded. Its construction was old, older than the current Veiltheri Empire, older than the Contact War, older than the events that had built to this moment. It was ugly in the way that truly functional things are often ugly, every surface worn, every angle chosen for purpose and not for appearance. It looked exactly like what it was. The last vessel of its kind. A carrier of record. It broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. In 17 languages, including all 5 Veiltheri regional dialects. It did not fire. It did not maneuver. It simply arrived, and broadcast, and waited. I did not know the exact content of the broadcast. I knew the shape of it. I had seen earlier versions in rooms I could no longer describe to anyone. It was a document, the most comprehensive document humanity had ever assembled. Every conflict we had fought, organized by duration, cost, and outcome. Every near-extinction event logged and analyzed. Every weapon system we had developed in our history, including the ones we had never used, described in enough technical detail to make clear that the restraint had been a choice and not an inability. And at the end of the document, in every language it was transmitted in a single paragraph. I had written that paragraph. In a quiet room, 11 years ago, while Oliver was finishing his work in a different quiet room somewhere I did not know. We had never met in person. We had communicated only through systems so layered and indirect that neither of us knew the other's face. But I knew the paragraph the way I knew my own heartbeat. It said, "We have shown you what we are. We have shown you what we have survived. We have shown you what we chose not to use. Now we are offering you the same choice we once gave ourselves, in our darkest periods, the choice to continue toward mutual harm, or to stop and find a different shape for this relationship. We do not have the luxury of assuming you will choose wisely. But we are extending the assumption anyway. This is what we do. This is, perhaps, the strangest thing about us. We extend assumptions of good faith to civilizations that have not earned them, because we have found, over a very long history, that it is the only way anything good ever begins. I had not been told whether the Archon would respond. I had been told that the vessel would wait for 72 hours, and that if no response came, the next phase would begin. I did not know all of what the next phase was. That was Oliver's side of things. I was still sitting on the floor when the cell door opened. Say stood in the frame. She was in a different uniform than the one she wore for our daily conversations, formal, with the rank marking on both shoulders instead of just the left. Behind her were 2 guards, but they were standing farther back than usual. At a respectful distance. The change in distance was small but significant. "The Archon has requested your presence," she said. "I know," I said. I stood. My knees took longer than they used to. Say noticed and did not comment on it, which was its own kind of respect. She handed me something. I looked down at it. My boots. Cleaned. The fraying laces replaced with new ones. I took them and put them on without speaking. We walked through the ship together. This time the crew we passed did not laugh. Some of them looked away. Others looked directly at me with expressions I had seen on human faces before, the expression that arrives when a person realizes a story they were in the middle of has turned out to have a different shape than they believed. The audience chamber was fuller than the last time. Every senior officer. Every advisor. The intelligence staff, including Aerith, who had been quietly reinstated at some point in the night, I could see the return of his formal designation on the badge at his collar. He stood near the wall, and when I entered, he looked at me with something I could only describe as wary acknowledgement. The Grand Archon was already standing. Not seated on his elevated platform. Standing on the floor, at its base. Same level as everyone else. Same level as me. That was the first thing that told me the conversation would be different. The female advisor, whose name I had since learned was Velith, through Say, who had stopped pretending her information sharing was accidental, stood beside the Archon with a data tablet and a stillness that was controlled but not comfortable. She had done the most thinking in the past 48 hours. I could see it in the particular kind of tiredness around her eyes, not the tiredness of lost sleep but the tiredness of a mind that had not been allowed to stop. "The vessel remains in position," the Archon said. "No greeting. No ceremony. It has not altered its broadcast since arriving. Our technical teams have reviewed the document it is transmitting. Yes, I said. Much of it is verifiable against our own records, he said. The historical portions. The conflict records. The description of your near-extinction periods matches data we have collected from independent sources over many years. It would, I said. We did not include anything in that document that could be disputed by honest inquiry. The technical specifications, Velith said, stepping forward. The weapon systems described. The ones marked as unused. Several of them exceed our own current development in theoretical destructive scope. Yes, I said. Those systems, she said carefully, are not listed as dismantled. No, I said. They are not. The room was extremely quiet. Are they active? She said. Some of them exist in states that do not map cleanly onto the distinction between active and inactive, I said. They were designed that way. A system that can be switched off can also be switched on by someone else. We learned that lesson at significant cost, early in our history. Then they are permanently armed, she said. They are permanently present, I said. What they do depends entirely on conditions we can influence but not always control. Velith looked at the Archon. Something passed between them, a look that had years of professional trust inside it. We require a framework for negotiation, the Archon said. If we are to accept the document's offer, we require a clear definition of terms. What does humanity want from this? I breathed in slowly. Humanity wants the same thing it has always wanted, I said. Enough space to exist without spending all of its energy defending that existence. We do not want territory beyond what we currently hold. We do not want reparations. We do not want a formal surrender document or the public acknowledgement of defeat from your empire. We understand what that would cost you politically and we do not require it. What do you require? Velith said. Withdrawal to pre-contact war positions, I said. A communication protocol between our species that is direct, verifiable, and not filtered through assumptions about relative civilizational value. And access to the independent diplomatic review process your empire maintains for other peer civilizations. You are asking to be classified as a peer civilization, the Archon said. We are asking to be classified as what we are, I said. A species with a longer and more complicated history than your records reflected. The classification is a recognition of fact, not a reward. Velith was making notes. Aerith, near the wall, had straightened slightly. The posture of someone who has spent 2 days being told his analysis was wrong and is now watching the room arrive at his conclusions without him. I looked at Aerith. He looked back at me. I gave him the smallest possible nod. Not victory. Not told you so. Just, you saw it correctly. That matters. He looked away. But his shoulders settled. The vessel, the Archon said. It will leave after an agreement is reached. It will leave when the agreement has been documented and transmitted to our own archive, I said. Then yes. It will leave. And the relay, he said. Relay 9. The others. The relay disruptions will resolve once withdrawal begins, I said. They were designed to scale with intention. When the intention changes, the effect changes. You built a system that responds to our decisions, Velith said. We built a system that responds to conditions, I said. Decisions create conditions. Another silence. Longer than any of the previous ones in this room. The Archon turned slightly away from me and looked at nothing in particular for a moment. I recognized that look. I had seen it on human faces at the ends of very long things. It was the look of someone doing the final accounting of what something had cost. He turned back. You will remain aboard as observer during the drafting process, he said. Say will coordinate your conditions. You will be given appropriate quarters and access to communication. Thank you, I said. He nodded once. Not a bow. Not a ceremony. Just the nod of one person to another when something has been agreed between them. Velith stepped toward me as the room began to move and breathe again. She spoke quietly. The paragraph at the end of the document, she said. You wrote it. It was not a question. How did you know? I said. It sounds like a person who has carried something very heavy for a very long time, she said. And who is accustomed to extending good faith to people who have not earned it yet. I looked at her. It is the strangest thing about us, I said. I believe I have heard that somewhere before. Something close to a smile crossed her face. Not a warm one. A careful one. The kind of smile that is also a question. I will want to speak with you during the drafting, she said. Not officially. Separately. There are things I want to understand about your history that are not in the document. There is a great deal that is not in the document, I said. Ask Say to arrange a time. She nodded and moved away. Say was at my shoulder. Proper quarters, she said. I will take you. We walked together through a ship that felt different than it had at any point in the previous month. Not lighter, exactly. Ships that carry the weight of changed decisions do not feel lighter. They feel differently heavy. The weight rearranged. In the new room, small, but with a window that showed the stars, actual stars, the first I had seen through anything other than my imagination in 29 days, Say stood at the doorway for a moment. You were afraid, she said. You told me that. During our conversations. Every day, I said. Of what, she said. Specifically. If you had such certainty about the outcome. I looked at the stars. I thought about what to say, and I decided to say the true thing, because she had earned the true thing. Of being wrong, I said. Not about the system. The system did what it was designed to do. But certainty about mechanisms does not touch the other kind of uncertainty. The kind about people. I was afraid that someone in that chamber would make a choice that could not be reversed. That the Archon would be the kind of leader who would rather lose everything than be the one who stepped back. I have known that kind of leader. Humanity produced many of them. And if he had been that kind, she said. I was quiet for a moment. Then we would have entered a very different part of the story, I said. One I am glad we do not have to tell. She absorbed that. The next 72 hours, she said. The drafting. It will be difficult. Yes, I said. They will push for terms that reduce the acknowledgement of what happened, she said. They will want language that makes it possible to tell their own people a cleaner version. I know, I said. I will allow them some of that. Not the parts that matter. The parts that are about saving face, those I will allow. Civilizations need to be able to tell themselves they made a reasonable choice. They almost never need to be publicly humiliated to make a reasonable choice. In fact, humiliation usually prevents the reasonable choice. She looked at me. You are quite unusual, she said. I have been told that, I said. Usually not as a compliment. I mean it as one, she said. Then she left. I stood at the window and looked at the stars. They were very bright. The ship had moved during the crisis, and we were in a different position relative to the local star field than when I had arrived. New stars visible. Old ones rotated out of view. The universe rearranging its display simply because we had moved. I thought of Oliver. I hoped his tomatoes were good. I hoped he was in his garden right now, in whatever light his local star was offering, doing something quiet and ordinary and completely separate from all of this. I thought of the 31 others. Each of them somewhere I would never be able to go. Each of them carrying their piece of the picture without knowing whether the picture had resolved into something bearable. I thought of the people who had made decisions that meant they would not be alive to see this room, this window, these stars. I thought of them the way I always thought of them, not in grief, which was too soft a word for it, but in the specific, careful attention that was the only thing I had left to give them. I had not cried since the early months of the war. Not because the feelings were not there. Because I had made an agreement with myself that there was a time for it, and this was not that time, and I would know the time when it arrived. Standing at that window, looking at stars that were the same stars whether or not anyone survived to look at them, I thought, perhaps that time is arriving. Not yet. But soon. I let the thought pass and turned away from the window and sat down and began, in my head, preparing the language I would need for the negotiation to come. There was still work to do. There was always still work to do. That was the thing they had laughed at, in the beginning. The old human in the cage, with his slow movements and his worn boots and his gray hair and his silence. They had laughed at what they saw, a remnant. A leftover. The last exhibit of a species in its final chapter. They had not seen what I was doing while they laughed. They had not understood that the silence was not emptiness. The silence was full. It had been full since the moment they captured me. Full of counting and listening and remembering and waiting. They had looked at a man who was almost at the end of his life and seen weakness. They had not considered that a man who has watched everything end and keep going anyway is not weak. He is simply finished being surprised. I have been underestimated by better civilizations than theirs. I have outlasted every one of them. Not through force. Not through brilliance. Through the oldest human method there is. I kept going. And so did we all.